Hello, welcome to a new webinar called Do More with Less. In a poor show of timing, a period of enlightenment for B2B marketing, with more marketing leaders coming around to the commercial rationale for long-term strategic brand marketing, has arrived at the party just as everyone else is leaving. 10 years ago, marketing was flush with cash, budgets were generous, risk-taking was rewarded, and growth at all costs was the playbook. Now, the game has changed. CMOs are being asked to do more with less. Now that means fewer people, tighter budgets and higher expectations, but nobody's actually talking about how we really make that work, let alone whether it's still possible to create bold, effective marketing that matters. So welcome to Do More with Less, a monthly webinar series where I, Mark Schwakey, author of B2B bestseller Boring to Brave, will talk to B2B marketing's top leaders on different aspects of a Do More with Less playbook. I'm tickled pink to be joined today by Matthew Robinson, VP Global Marketing at Autone, to start discussions about the new marketing leadership model, the skills that matter most in 2025, and the character traits and strategies separating those who thrive from those who don't. Welcome, Matt. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me, Mark. How are you doing?
Yeah, very, very well. Very well. You've recently come back to the UK from 4 or 5 years working your magic as VP of Content Square out in Southeast Asia. How are you doing being back in the UK?
Yeah, it's been great to be back. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it was a bit of a shock coming back in January from 30-degree heat to the sort of 4-degree coldness. But no, it's great to be back here and see family and friends. And
yeah, for any listeners, Matt's being absolutely heroic here because he spent half a month sending me messages, in fact, not at all professional, nothing to do with would you like to come for a beer, just literally saying what the bloody hell's going on here, what is this country all about? So listen, welcome back to the UK.
Thanks.
We are both living through a new period of marketing. I wonder how new it is though. Is do more with less? We all know the phrase, but is it a phase we've got to get through? Or is it more likely to be a permanent correction? Is it more likely to be the new normal?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think marketing in general is so hard to predict, and I wouldn't want to say with any degree of confidence, look, is it here to stay or is it just the next few years? But I think it's even more so like if it wasn't before, like now is even more difficult to be a marketer. There was this stat a few years back around the CMO having the shortest tenure out of all of the C-suites, and I think that's likely to get shorter. And I just think it's because marketing isn't as black and white as perhaps the other functions. I think if you're in sales, you're very much driven by numbers. How much are you closing? If you're in product, it's about the products you're building. If you're in customer success, that's customer satisfaction. But marketing is actually inherently quite subjective. We often have very different KPIs, and they're not always measured the same as well. And we've just got so many competing factors to consider. It's not just about executing what we do in executing good marketing. It's also about the strategic alignment with these other departments. It's the fighting to not be like the sales as dog's body, but actually their strategic partner in crime. So there's all of these competing priorities going on. Like, it is tough. And again, as you mentioned, like, budgets are definitely not what they were. Resources aren't what they were. And the expectation's even higher than it was before when we've got less. So yeah, tricky times.
But you must have worked through periods before we came to know do more with less as the environment we were sitting in, where there was not enough budget to do what you were hoping for, aiming for, or ambitiously looking to achieve, right? So there must be something left over from the creative instincts of the Matthew Robinson of old, where you can figure out how much money you've got and how to stretch it, or is it tangibly different?
No, I think it's a really good point. I think the marketing fundamentals, are still the same as they were. It's, producing quality marketing with a specific goal in mind. And absolutely, in terms of, prioritization, I think that's probably become as important as it was when, times where the budgets were large. I think prioritization is going to be absolutely crucial, and that's always the case. And it's honestly like, you can have a marketing budget of 10,000 or 10 million. But ultimately, it's about like, what are your marketing goals? What are your objectives? And what's the plan? And I think, yeah, marketers have to become more marketing and get more creative. As budgets are slightly lower in order to get ahead. It's gone are the days that you can just have a lot of testing budget, put money into different channels, see what works, figure it out. We've got to be a lot more ruthless with that budget. Like we can definitely test, but also we've got to be like, actually, when's the time to cut and when's the time to sort of invest in the channels that are going to make the biggest impact.
Something you said earlier about KPIs, I'm just thinking, one of the ways in which I've found relative success in convincing leadership teams, and in particular the CEO and the CFO to, I think I'd be bold in describing it as bending them to my will, but in giving me an opportunity to try something different, is to offer to have the entire marketing KPI around revenue. You said before that lots of our KPIs are intangible and hard to understand and not numerical based. Do you think if we as marketers were to adopt a norm where we are literally measured on revenue, same as everybody else, we give ourselves more rope to hang ourselves, or more license to stick our heads above a parapet and try something different?
No, it's a great point of view. Like I'm a firm believer in like marketers absolutely should have a revenue target and it should be aligned to a business target. I think it can be difficult because not every single marketing action aligns to generating revenue, and the danger of having a sole revenue target is that you're going to be assessed with like, how is this making money? And I think it's always a balance between brand and demand. I think, there's an absolute blend, but sometimes you'll put money into something, whether it's a content initiative, it could be a podcast, a video series, whatever that may be. There might not be any tangible revenue driven at that time or ability to measure the impact, but it's also equally as important as doing something that there's a clear net revenue result. So I think yes to having a revenue target, but also understanding that not every marketing action is going to have a direct correlation to revenue. And one thing that I think is a trend that I've definitely seen happening in my marketing career is more and more measurement. And honestly, I think it's got to the point where we're now over measured. There's so many different metrics and we try and over engineer everything. And honestly, like I'm now at the point where I'm like, I think we need to strip it back. And it's almost like, it's not as crude and rudimentary as like, does it pass the sniff test? But it's like, actually, what marketing we're doing, is it good quality? Does it serve our purpose and our goal? And do we think it's good? Like forgetting about any measurement, like if we're putting a piece of content out, whether it's a webinar, is this good? Is this quality? Is it serving our audience? Regardless if it goes and makes revenue or we can measure it, it's like, actually, do we think this is good and impactful and different and bold and creative? We don't have to over-engineer and over-measure everything. So I think that's the tricky balance to strike.
Yeah, it's a conversation to have. I mean, I'm sure I could invite you back for a future episode where you and I could run through our greatest hits of marketing campaigns that just weren't good. I'm sure we've got enough in our lockers. But I want to pick you up on something you said and give you a kind of not an opposing view, but I want to challenge something. You said a balance between brand and demand when you were talking about marketing activity that isn't there to make money. I think the true, or at least from my point of view, the true sort of distinction and sort of balance is between brand and lead gen. I think there's a lot of brand work in B2B marketing that goes into demand gen. We don't have millions of pounds worth of advertising budgets to put on TV and on billboards. And those that have used those great big advertising platforms like Workbooks last year in its no bullshit CRM campaign that did really, really well, they did put billboard media and out of home media out as part of its budget and did very, very well out of it. Most of us don't have those budgets. But we can, through demand generation, drive brilliant brand equity through better copywriting, better messaging, more integrated conversations across every department of the organization. I think when it comes to the parts that don't make money immediately, I think we have to equate do more with less with a conversation about, okay, but it's going to take longer. And actually, that suits me as a professional marketer that knows that nothing good happens tomorrow. All the lead gen companies that promise me lists of customers that will eventually last no more than 3 months because they weren't the right companies or the right customers in the first place. They were just leads, okay? I'm not interested in actually anymore. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with the right kind of CFO and the right kind of CEO. You're asking me to do more with less, that's fine, but here's how it's going to look. It's going to take longer. It's going to go deeper. We have to do more about who we are, what we stand for, and why we're different than just capturing names. Is that okay? That's my part of the deal. Your part of the deal is I'm going to have fewer heads, fewer resources, tighter budgets, and better results. But there has to be there has to be something to balance it out. I just wonder whether B2B marketers as a whole, as a tribe, I wonder whether we've got the right kind of leadership skills throughout the whole community to have that conversation, or whether it is incumbent on people like yourself, a senior marketer, to train people into having that conversation.
No, loads of good points. I think taking sort of a few things you said there. So I think I do agree. I think we're probably saying it in different ways, but like for me, it's brand and demand, but they are mutually exclusive. And when I say demand, that's more, demand generation, tangible things that you can equate to driving revenue for your business, but also plenty of demand generation activities help with the brand. Let's say if you're doing a event or you're doing a webinar, for example, that's going to be demand because you can equate hard dollars from people that attend, that you follow up with, to revenue. But it also helps your brand because it's quality content that you're putting out there. You're showing your point of view. And it's this notion of creating the demand as well. I think one thing that I think B2B in particular are especially naive is the notion that as soon as people are aware of you, they'll be interested and want to buy. And it's actually a lot of the work we need to put in is around creating that demand. Actually, why do you have the credibility? Why should we trust you? Why should we pay attention when there's all these competing factors and messages and people trying to reach out and compete for your eyeballs? How are you going to actually create that sort of emotive factor that's going to get people interested and lead people to your product? So I think that's one thing. And in terms of, I guess, the skill set on the second point, I think this is incredibly difficult. And again, maybe I think B2B marketers aren't great at managing expectations of clearly sitting down with your CEO, your CFO and going, look, here is the reality. Here are the deliverables. But again, it's that time management expectation. I think, often CEOs want everything all at once, and it's striking the balance between, yes, we're going to do these things that are going to generate the short-term, financial impact, but also these are more strategic projects that are going to take longer. They're not necessarily going to do an immediate revenue, but they're really important. Here's why. And I think we're probably poor at communicating that, sharing the roadmap and explaining the why and the goals behind the things they do. Often we're caught in this sort of hamster wheel of execute, and instead of taking a step back and having a strategic lens to be these are the things that are going to impact the business and correlate to the business strategy of the overall company, which I think is really important.
All right. Well, look, what I promised our audience today was that I was going to have a conversation with you on the skills and leadership traits that really matter in the era of do more with less. Okay. So you can talk a little bit, if you would, about some of the fail-safe responses to challenges that you've developed in your various roles around the world. But ultimately, this conversation is going to end for all attendees and registrants in, to steal the phrase from the CRM campaign that Workbooks created at the end of last year. I want to put together a bullshit-free guide from this webinar episode to optimizing marketing strategy for today's do more with less reality. So let's think about what we should put on it. Now, you'll have made some bullet points. Some of the things that I was thinking about: skills and character traits, be senior enough to befriend and impress your CEO and CFO, but also humble enough to get dirty in the trenches with your troops. Maybe it's something about being better at hiring. Content creation is only expensive if your writers are crap, frankly, if your content people just simply don't know or feel how to write like humans. It might be something about choosing your vendors and partners carefully. It might be enough to around getting close to your SDRs and using business development outbound calling as your sort of secondary distribution content channel. Tell me what you've got on your list. Tell me what you're thinking of when you think about the skills or character traits that are going to matter in an era of do more with less.
So I think I've touched on the first one. I think just having strong convictions. I think it's so easy for marketing, in particular marketing leaders, to be swayed by sales wants this, the CEO wants this, somebody else is asking for this. And I think we're all guilty of this at some point in our weeks, in our marketing tenures. But I think it's really important to go back to like having a marketing strategy. And I honestly think that like a lot of brands don't have a clear and obvious way to communicate the strategy. So I think that's one. It's having strong convictions, saying this is what we're doing and not wavering too much. Of course, it's good to be flexible and have that sort of 10%.
No. Stick with it. Stick with it. Sorry,
sticking with it.
Screw flexibility. No, I'm serious. Let's. I mean, everybody in business needs to be flexible, so let's take that as a given. Yeah. Talk to me about that strong convictions piece for somebody who's in a first job out of university in some kind of social media executive role. That's not going to be easy. But let's take it a little bit up the experience ladder and say 3 to 5 years in. Talk to me about where you get the bravery or where you get the kind of brass to have that strong conviction. Is it about reading and learning and studying and making sure that you can back up everything you say with some kind of data or experience or theory? How do you do that in a world where, let's face it, a lot of the non-marketers we have to face are going to be dyed-in-the-wool, experienced, older generations that are there with their own money on the line. How do we develop those convictions? Because I don't believe B2B marketing is quite there yet.
No, and I think it actually stems from a lack of guidance from leaders, and I think as marketing leaders we need to facilitate this sort of behaviour, because I think it's something that is difficult to learn, and it's a personality trait that some people will be more proactive and more, I guess, bold than others, but I think it's something we need to facilitate. And maybe to give you some like tangible examples of how I try to do this in my teams. So one is, I think it's really important for people to have an opinion, which sounds completely daft, but honestly, the amount of marketers that don't have a strong opinion, like, give us some feedback on this landing page. What do you think about this content piece? And it's just like, yeah. So one thing I used to do is like insist on my team, okay, like I'm going to send them, like ring fence an hour in each week and send them a few things to come back and feedback on. And then it sort of sharpens that tool of like, okay, I need to look at this from a critical lens. And then so forth, you build that as a habit, and actually then you can get more discerning marketers that have an opinion. They're more willing to push back on things, more willing to challenge some of the ideas that they get from other people in the business. And I think that's a really important trait, is to like be able to sort of nurture and cater for those.
What's a time when you either had an opinion that you knew to be right, shouted down by those that were wrong, or went behind their backs anyway and did what you knew to be right because you knew what they didn't and you knew you could make it succeed? Because let's face it, you don't get any trust by adopting a status quo and not trying. The only way you get trust and maybe a little bit more budget is by winning, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about a time where you kind of broke the status quo, or you were a bit of a troublemaker.
I think maybe a good example of this is a previous company where we wanted to do a sort of an annual conference with a twist, with a difference. And at the time it was like, no, it's too early in our journey. We'll get to this maybe next year, but for now just concentrate on smaller events, other activities. And we were like, no, screw this. We want to go out with a pop. I remember sitting down with the team at the time. It was just two of us, and we sat down, went out for a long lunch, and we sort of wrote a list of like everything that we thought was wrong or we hated about conferences. And at the time, this was maybe 2016, 2017. Most conferences were in a Hilton hotel venue, all in the same venue with like the same carpets, the same terrible food.
Bad carpets, man.
Yeah. Can't stand a bad carpet.
I mean, honestly, it's the first thing you change when you can Can we do something about the
need
carpet?
to address the carpets. But, they would be like 9 till 5. It would be like an hour-long presentations, boring panels, no energy. People just didn't really want to network or engage. There was just a whole list. The content was poor. So we made this list and we were like, look, let's subvert this and challenge each one, address each one at a time to do something different. And we sort of came up with at the time, which was quite sort of bold and new, and no one was really doing it, of like the idea of like a rebel conference. So we're like, okay, instead of the boring food, we'll have like, great food trucks from, some of London's best food trucks in there. Instead of the content, we were like, let's turn it into a 20-minute TED Talk style where we'll actually sit down with them before, which I think rarely people do, and actually go through their presentation. So it's not a 15-minute boring intro of all of their past experiences, but you're getting into the meat of what's valuable. And basically went ahead and like sort of turned these things on its head, launched it, and, the event was a great success and it was adopted sort of globally. So again, I think that's a good example of, asking for forgiveness, not permission. We were just like, we're just going to go ahead and do it anyway. It increases the pressure to make things a success. But actually, if you're not bold and you're not, different, often these things, won't work. So I think, again, that's probably another trait, is to be bold and have definitely an element of bravery.
Were you prepared to lose your job over it, Matt? If it had gone wrong, would you have been more than content to hold your hands up and take the poison?
For that particular instance, I think I would have, because I think we're strong in our convictions that the B2B events were broken and it needed to be fixed, and it was the right approach. I think in that instance, losing the job is quite strong, but like certainly was prepared for any consequences of it not being successful, not generating revenue, having some negative feedback, because I think, you've got to, as long as you've got a justification of the reasons that you did it and it was strong at the time. I hate Captain Hindsight people where it's like something goes wrong with a campaign or whatever it is and it's finger pointing, oh, we shouldn't have done that. It's like tough, like it's like hard, like that's hard lines.
Introduced to my wife Deborah. Hooray!
It's just like, if it was a great idea at the time, you backed it up, and it doesn't always have to be data. Again, it goes back to what I said before of like, does it pass the sniff test? Do we think this is a quality piece of work or initiative? And are we excited about it? And do we believe in it? And I think that's what we're going to start with.
So top of the no bullshit guide to living through Do More with Less is be brave. What else have we got? Because I was thinking this morning about channel choosing, right? The obvious remedy to having fewer budgets, fewer resources and less of a budget is that marketers are going to strip down their marketing plans, not just their marketing plans, as in what to say, what to create, how to get it out there, their media plans. And the obvious way to go is to go, do you know what? We have to go from 3 to 5 channels to 1 to 2 channels. I don't like channel choosing. I picking one channel rather than 2 doesn't actually do what you need it to do in most cases. I'm thinking about you got a tighter budget and fewer resources. You need to use the whole company to talk more about your strong message with more alignment across every single function. Again, I'm going to hark back to one of the things I loved about the workbooks campaign last year was when they talked about no bullshit. They got a load of that they'd never had emails before back from their email campaigns, because their email campaigns traditionally had been very, very product focused, very samey, very corporate, and the same emails as everybody else was sending. So they'd literally never had an email back, which is kind of it's kind of standard in B2B marketing. Yeah. They started getting emails back saying, okay, you've got my attention, now what? And the reason they did was because the no bullshit was replicated everywhere. It wasn't just something that stuck in the marketing department. It was used on the website, like hero messaging. It was used all over the product, all over the packaging, right? So I'm thinking about, I don't like picking channels, but I do think do more with less means making tough decisions by definition, right? So sometimes I find customers of mine, clients of mine, working with customers that are just bad for them. And the marketing department is the most outspoken about it. They know. Now, if anything, if do more with less means making tough decisions, does marketing have the influence in a business to advise on turning certain prospects away? Highly unlikely. Not in B2B marketing, no way. But could you start seeding and documenting the language into your own organization on early signals that make for a future bad customer? Yes. You can seed those in meetings, you can document them, you can put them into the system and start to, from our research, these are the signals that have been common to customers that turned out to be bad for us. So I'm thinking, in do more with less, is there a way to be more influential, more grown up, more strategic, more than just the stuff you make to say at conferences and events? It's the conversations you're having indoors.
Yeah, I think lots to unpack there. I think probably just taking one thing you said, which is around, pulling in those insights. I think there's a couple of interesting points on those. I think the first is, and especially in B2B, well, often it's like an echo chamber where we're all agreeing the same things and saying the same things. I think whatever your specific industry is, you've got to find the non-obvious insights. Like, how are you going to tease out the things that you can't just get from plugging into ChatGPT? You can't get from just Googling and scouring the internet. And for me, it's like the stories that matter. And I think a lot of that comes from A, speaking to customers, or B, understanding some of their trigger points, as you mentioned. And I think that the best content that I've produced, the best content that I've seen produced, are from conversations with the experts themselves. That you're never going to reach the level of expertise as a customer of somebody that you're selling to in B2B. And I think it could be a phrase that they use, it could be one thing that could germinate a whole campaign. So I think understanding and paying close attention and having more of those customer interactions or prospects interactions is going to be key, because I think you get insights and phrases there that you wouldn't get anywhere else.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. And something you said just sparked a thought. I'm having a conversation very soon, which is coming up on a future webinar for anyone interested. And by the way, if you let us know, we can totally save you a seat for the next webinar coming up in this series about your own executives as creators, as content creators and as experts. And rather than hiring in or buying in favors or using just your customers for customer stories, it's about using the expertise and the passion and the insight from really smart people you didn't even know you had in your organization to be your marketing front door, your marketing heroes. We work with, I'm currently spending my time working with a company called OrbitLex, which does end-to-end demand generation for B2B companies. And one of our brilliant clients in the States has found this guy working in its organization as a project manager, that suddenly they've discovered him. He's charismatic, he's smart, he knows the product backwards. He's got magnificent hair, by the way, just as a bald guy. But he is this incredible storyteller. And they're pouncing on him. And now his job is stretched because every department wants a piece of him, and marketing are really, really putting him front, left and center. Okay. And you look at his background, and actually he doesn't come from tech and he doesn't come from marketing. He comes from a whole range of backgrounds. He's been in film production. He's been an angel investor. He's worked for the likes of HBO and Netflix, as everything from a production manager to a kind of location expert to producer and writer. He's done freelance storytelling. He's volunteered for the Red Cross. This guy's got so much to him, and he comes from outside of marketing, and yet right now he's an absolute gem. And of course, what you're doing by having someone internally who is passionate and smart and natural enough as a storyteller to front up your marketing activity and campaigns, you're saving money, you're saving time, and you're making the best of your own people. I really love that example.
I love that too, and it's actually something that I've sort of discovered at Tone. Is actually the quickest win and the easiest win as a new or even existing marketing exec is to leverage your internal people. Honestly, I've just been having internal 45-minute interviews with teams just based on their experience, their point of view. And it's like a gold mine. And I think too often we think, we need to get a customer. Let's try and get this customer.
Or let's get Rory Sutherland, or let's get,
like an external speaker. When actually, a lot of expertise and insights can come from internally as well. So I think that's an underrated channel to actually speak to people in different departments, whether that's engineering, because you can uncover gems that can really help drive sort of the message forward.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that in the world of B2B marketing, If you say suddenly you're living through, if we transported everybody into this new portal, this new world called Do More with Less, the assumption is, Christ, we're going to have to really work hard. So let's make sure everything counts, everything is measured. Let's pour whatever budget we have into PPC, SEO, and that digital marketing space where you could get results. I'm largely known as I'm not a skeptic of this stuff, but I do think that we don't do it properly and it has to be twinned with a wider, broader brand piece. But in a world of you've got less money to spend, what are you going to do? And we're waiting for you, by the way. The assumption is going to be, let's go quick, let's go digital, let's get results that we can show and results that we can measure. But to quote a guy called Greg Hahn from an American agency giant called Mischief, I believe in fame is a luck multiplier. The more people who are aware of you or your business, the more opportunities are going to come your way. And we forget about fame in such a big way in B2B marketing. And if you are going to be famous, you need to have something outrageously interesting, new or different to say. And you have to prove it. You have to back it up with behaviors. But to start with, that messaging, that writing needs to come through every single one of your channels. And as I said before, the most expensive way to do content creation is to have crap writers. Is the idea, is there an argument here for just starting with a single point of reference for your next hire, a brilliant writer and a better writer than you've got now, or a better writer than you've got in your organization or that you've ever worked with? Is better writing the key to better brand awareness, more stories that count and resonate, and therefore more fame?
Love that. I love that quote, the fame is a luck multiplier. Love that. Absolutely. I think, when the AI rose to prominence a couple of years ago and it became, something that a lot of teams, especially content writers, were looking at with an element of fear. It's like, is this going to replace me? Are teams just going to chuck everything into a custom-made ChatGPT? But I think content is still now even more so an important tool in a B2B organization's portfolio, purely because they can help you, as you said, get the stories and the non-obvious insights that can stand out and be different. One of the things that I try to do, and it's not always possible, is every time we create a piece of content, it's two mantras. Is it interesting or is it useful? The sweet spot is it's both. It's like an interesting, entertaining read, and it actually helped the person do their day-to-day job. Doesn't even have to be useful, but is it interesting? Does it captivate them? And I just think now, with the rise of AI, and yes, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that as a topic, and I'm definitely keen to get your thoughts as well. But I just think we need to stand out and be different. And I just think the safety blanket could be we can go and produce more, and when it's more with less, let's go and chuck everything into ChatGPT to spit out some extra blogs, and I can actually scale. But I think scaling often can lead to blandness, and I think you've got to balance the moments of joy, the moments of difference with the ability to scale. And I agree. I think it's doing several things really well. And to be fair, this is probably an unpopular opinion, but I think, and I see this in conversations, this is not just my opinion, but you mentioned that paid media and digital. The ecosystem has changed when it comes to how startups in particular are approaching marketing. It used to be, we'll bung a load into ads, whether it's LinkedIn or PPC. That was feasible 10 years ago when the costs were reasonable. Now it's, I did some keyword research for my current company, and it's insane. It's, we're looking at $100 a click, and that's not a verified person. That could be anybody, and you're paying for that click. That's not scalable. You get 10 clicks at $1,000. You're just that could be 10 useless people versus investing to another channel where at least you're going to make the brand more famous, whether it's a webinar or a strong piece of content. So yeah, I agree. I think the role of content and a strong, fantastic content writer is more important than ever, because again, we're getting a deluge of information and content. What's going to get your eyeballs? What's going to get your attention? What's going to make you listen, read a blog, read this email, join this webinar? And I think that's going to be key.
Read to the end. Everybody forgets that the idea of a blog is that you've got 400 words or 800 words. the 799th out of 800 could be absolutely massive to you. And if you don't have people reading to the end, you missed. No, look, I'm with you. B2B marketing for me is like 7 or 8 steps, right? You've got your ICP data piece. You've got your who do we sell to and why. Then you've got the research piece. What's driving them, what's killing them, what's challenging them, what they aspire to. How can I make this person's profile higher and more elevated? How can I make them feel instantly cleverer, smarter, more effective and promotable? Then you've got your story, like you know who you sell to now, you know what drives them. So let's put together a distinct, differentiated positioning in the market that's going to catch people's eyes and hearts, right? And story that's going to land on everybody and open their eyes as if there's a brand new idea out there. You then use that story for events and campaigns and content, and that's the part that we generally get involved in. As B2B marketers, I can count on half a hand the number of young B2B marketers I find that haven't managed to break into any of the previous, but the ICP, the data, the research, the story. They go straight into events, campaigns and content. Then you've got kind of specific offers and promotions to draw people in and start building that sort of funnel. Then you've got business development, and if you're working with your SDRs or if marketing owns business development and that piece, and kind of all your bits of paid social and LinkedIn, and repeat, because nothing happens tomorrow. And I find that B2B marketing is this like 7 or 8 step process of which we only really ever get involved in 1 or 2 steps. And even with those 1 or 2 steps that we get involved in, if you haven't got the best writer in the country, if you haven't got the best writer in your market, you're already failing. I see content creators or content managers, and sometimes they call themselves all sorts of things. And they're very, very good or proficient, let's say, at kind of workflow and the technical parts and loading things up and timing things out to go at the right time. But they're absolutely terrible at dealing with humans and relationships and storytelling. And it's heartbreaking to watch. So I would say one of the top activations you can do to increase your marketing effectiveness right now is to go out there and look for the best writer you can get. And by the way, if you don't know how to do that, find somebody that does to help you, because it's as I said with this client in America, it's probably not someone you'd expect. This guy's come from campaigning and location networking and TV and film production. So yeah, yeah, go for it.
So yeah, 3 points there. I think it's great. I think one, absolutely agree, and I think it's something that we should talk about more, is the putting in the groundwork at B2B, like database. It starts there in terms of the data, your ICP. Most teams aren't doing a good enough job at the groundwork, the fundamentals of B2B, which is understanding your audience, what they want, who they are, and then actually going in and augmenting that in your database. It starts there. All good marketing starts there. 2, in terms of stories, like completely agree. It's teasing those angles, and I think that not enough work is done by marketers to enhance or uncover what is the company's story. I know that sometimes new incoming marketing execs get a bad reputation for let's go in and do a rebrand and change the logo, but the most important part of that is the narrative. It's what is the narrative? Can we change this? Can we tease it out to make it more compelling? And what stories can we capture and tell? And just the third point in terms of finding amazing content teams. I see this as absolutely a trend in terms of outsourcing expertise. I think again, in the age of do more with less, you're not going to be able to have the same huge bloated marketing teams that you had, where you've got a specialist for PPC, a specialist for these different channels. It's actually about now. It's a trend that I'm seeing when I'm speaking to my peers, is outsourcing subject matter experts. You don't necessarily need somebody 5 days a week for a specific task, but actually if you can try and outsource to a boutique agency, to an individual that can do that expertise, but in a fraction of the time, that's how you're going to empower and scale. Again, I was probably quite naive coming into this company thinking, okay, it's a small team, it's a team of 2 with agencies and freelancers now. The reality is, with the pressures and the tasks with a modern marketing exec, it's not like I've got 8-9 hours a day to do marketing. It's the stakeholder management, these other areas. So it's actually bringing in people that you can trust, that can be proactive, that can work with the strategy that you set to produce this amazing work. I think that's key, and that's definitely a trend, whether it's fractionals, agencies. You need to bring in these experts, and I see that more and more.
Get it. Listen, as you have just mentioned narrative, I wanted to make an offer to anyone listening today. I'm currently, as I said, spending a lot of time working with a brilliant company called Orbital X, a business that offers end-to-end demand generation capability for marketing leaders struggling in this era of do more with less. Now, what goes into that service is about 150 plus curated steps, because really that's what's required to build demand generation in today's market. And we're giving away a couple of workshops where we'll take you through, it's about a morning's work with two of us coming in, wherever you are. We've been to Berlin recently, we've been all over, to talk to you about the specific narrative and story that's going to elevate you above and beyond your competitors. Now, we would do some work on your ICP to understand exactly who you sell to. We would understand a little bit about what's worked in the past and what hasn't and why and how you're structured. But by the end of a workshop, you would be in possession of the assets, the methodology, and the words that make up a market-leading, banging story to make sure that you are noticed and that you trigger the right emotions and the right responses in your audience. Now, these are workshops that we use for clients, but we've got two of them available. If you think you'd benefit from any of that kind of work with us, we bring our storytelling. We've got a whole storytelling team, some of the best in class. Would come to you if you click or make it plain that you are looking for that kind of help. Be in touch as soon as this webinar is finished, and if you're one of the lucky winners to get a spot, we'll get back to you straight away. Now, Matt, you mentioned AI earlier. And in London, a couple of months ago, I stood up in front of an audience of about 50 marketing leaders and talked to them about bankable storytelling in the age of AI. And it was about 50 or 60 slides and a couple of hours and then drinks and food afterwards. But it all could have been condensed into a single slide that I had in there, really, honestly. Written as a tweet by my favourite new marketer of his time. I don't know who he is or I've never met him, but his name is Isaac I.O. Shankler. And he wrote a tweet on February the 17th last year that I still have on my wall in my office that says, why isn't AI doing the tedious shit for creative people instead of the creative shit for tedious people? And you asked me where I stand, it's pretty much that. Like, my idea of how we can best employ and deploy this incredible technology is quite simply, it's transforming the world. Let's not get in its way. There are huge numbers of brilliant things that companies out there are doing with AI, but one thing they shouldn't be doing is trying to be interesting and different. Discuss.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic. I think I completely agree. Right, like it's not something that's like it's here. Like it's done. It's not whether we need to embrace it or not. It's going to be a part of our lives, and it's going to be it is, and it's going to be even more transformational. But I completely agree. And we've actually got an initiative that started a couple of weeks ago in our company, which I think you'll be a fan of this use of AI, which is basically like we're writing down all of the time-consuming, boring, tedious shit that we have, and then there's a task force which is like, how can we get? And it's not necessarily AI, but how can we optimize this? So basically, like it's all of the background stuff, the tedious stuff. How can we see if AI can help do this? So it frees up our time to do compelling, great work and use our creative minds, which is our big key point of difference. And I think absolutely that's how it can be, to free up time to concentrate on doing the things that we do best. And it's just never gonna be at the moment. It just you can't replace a human when we're talking, in terms of marketing, especially around the content creative piece, because there's all these factors, as you mentioned, of like understanding your ICP, having these non-obvious insights. Like if it's literally pulling from what exists already, how are you going to get the new creative, the new ideas from it? So I think, completely agree. It's leveraging it for sure, but it's not taking over and just like getting lazy. And I think the danger that I see, especially for young marketeers, is I'm worried that it will take away skill sets, and then at 20 years' time, we'll be missing some of the key skill sets like creativity. Because, rather than starting from a blank sheet of paper like we used to do, it's like, oh, you can just prompt into ChatGPT, and already you've got, a framework, and that can be a great thing as a starting point. But I just think that takes away something from the ability to go in to do that research. It kind of almost can make marketers lazy. And I really worry, especially for the younger generation of marketers coming through, they're going to rely too heavily on that and not enough on their own intuition and their own talent and skills.
Matthew Robinson, thank you. This has been amazing. This is the first episode of many called Do More With Less. Matthew can be found at Autone, the platform doing amazing things with inventory management for top retailers around the world. My name is Mark Schwakey. This has been Do More With Less. See you next month.